with Miriam Toews, and we are so excited, or I am so excited, to be able to kind of be in conversation with an author who I've read a lot of books and who have ultimate respect for both the way she writes and the subjects that she chooses to write about. Never kind of shying away from what's complicated or difficult, and also recognizing real life and those little tiny moments of just pleasure and joy that exist for all of us if we are lucky enough. So, Miriam, it's really great to be here with you today.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. So we're talking a little bit early, so this is going to air in a couple months or even 3 or 4 months. But we're going to talk mostly, I think, today about your new book called Fight Night, which we've chosen as one of our first edition club picks for this year. We do 2 novels and one non-political nonfiction, so you were one of the one of the two right there. Um, and there's so many places to start, but I guess I would love to just ask you kind of sort of when did this book start to take shape for you?
I think it started to take shape when my first when my first grandchild was born, and I'll soon actually have 4 grandchildren. So there's just been a lot of grandchildren in these last few years. Both my son and my daughter are having kids, like to beat the band. And so I was thinking of my mother, and their great grandmother, and just how she's this remarkable human being, and has experienced a lot of stuff in life, and she's just sort of, she is in life. I mean, she's kind of my role model, really, in a way. And she's just a force. She's this kind of life force, and she's eccentric, and I really wanted my grandchildren to kind of know her. But of course, and she's 85 years old, and not in great health, so they probably won't know her. So I thought, oh well, if I could write some fiction, kind of, starring my mother, my mother, as a central character, a character based on my mother anyway. But there were also things that I was thinking about, like some of the things that have happened in our family, like issues of with mental illness and addiction and suicide, and these very hard, very, difficult subjects. And I knew that my grandchildren, again, thinking about my grandchildren and these babies being born into our family, and how they would, as they got older, they would have questions, and they would think about these things. And I do know that, when there's suicide and mental illness, especially like serious, mental illness. I mean, all mental illness is serious, but um, it's there's a fear. There's a fear that will, inherit this, or my grandchildren, will also suffer from this, or my children. And it's something that, you're sort of always on the lookout for. And just kind of being aware of, and it's sort of terrifying. And so I just wanted to write a book that would kind of, sort of in a way, address these darker, subjects, these themes, basically, things that had happened in my family. And again, to show that, we can get through this, we can survive this, we're resilient. So it was basically, kind of a book that I wanted to write really with my grandchildren in mind, child's guide to death and madness.
I mean, I think that your other books obviously will fill in some of that too, and I think that's then another question that I would have about where truth and fiction kind of sort of collide, and how you'll parse out for them, what was true and what was not. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Taking, because I write fiction and, predominantly, and so that's where I'm comfortable. So and always has been, with my other books too. And just, as I write, it's that, basically taking from here and there and, mixing it up and, some stuff, people in my life, my kids, my grandchildren, eventually when they read, they'll, be able to identify and know, and other stuff is, just made up.
I know. I mean, you haven't changed her name though, right? Like,
No, that's right. I used my mother's real name. Yeah, yeah, just her name. I used her real name. And it was sort of like, it was just a decision that I made as I was going along. And, I didn't even think, oh, I'll change this later. Often I would do that, right? When the thing is finished before it's published. But this time I just decided to leave it.
I mean, it's an honor, I'm sure. It seems like the mutual admiration you both have for each other.
Well, I mean, it's certainly, I mean, our relationship. My mother lives with me, lives with my partner Eric and I. She's on the main floor of the house, and we're on the second floor, and and so that's been wonderful. She might say the same thing, but it's just great to have her here, and so it's just, and it was kind of a necessary thing for us to be together, after my father died, and then my sister died, and I don't have any other siblings, and she needs a little bit of care, so it just made sense for us to be together. So yeah,
Yeah.
we're close in every way.
No, I think
Physically.
I'm glad that that's true because it certainly shows.
Yeah.
And I always question when, I mean, I know relationships are complicated, but the closer you are, especially I think as grown-ups get older and parents get older, almost the easier it is. Like it's not, I think
Yeah.
sometimes it might feel harder for people, but it seems to have to go the, least amount of distance.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, obviously there are frustrations, at times for both of us, my mother and myself. But for the most part, you understand each other, know each other, rhythms and patterns and needs, and and we can be there for each other. So
And I know I was reading in the New Yorker article, I think a scene that then appears in this book where perhaps she had fallen like at night and
right,
just sort of sang to herself until somebody
yeah,
came. Which it's
yeah,
when you read it in the New Yorker article is like touching, and when you read it in this, it's just hysterical.
yeah. There you go. See, yeah, I'm processing it.
I just read for the first time the Copenhagen trilogy,
Okay, yeah, I read it too, just recently. Yeah.
and I was trying to talk about why I liked it so much because I loved it and I thought it was probably one of the most important books I've ever read in some ways. And a friend of mine who's a writer and a writing teacher at one point said something like, and it's funny. And I thought to myself, oh, wait, it is like it is. She's very funny. And I feel like you also have this way. I mean, I almost want to say like you're funnier. Um,
Oh.
but when you mix humor, I guess right, that dark humor, like that's magical, I think is what I want to say.
That's nice. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think I love the Copenhagen trilogy as well, too. I was in Winnipeg, Manitoba, with, the birth of a different grandchild, and waiting for that book to be delivered because I couldn't really find it here. And so I had ordered it, from a shop in, I think, the UK or something like that. And I was really, really, waiting for this book. And I kept asking, Eric, who was still here in Toronto, has it arrived? Has it arrived? Has it arrived? Because I was afraid that, it just wouldn't get here. So I was thrilled too. Anyway, a little aside, I was thrilled too to have read that book, and I also thought it was amazing and funny and dark, and dealing with similar themes that I write about, and I think that the funny thing is just it's just a kind of, I don't think it's a in her work or in mine, it's not necessarily like a contrived or conscious thing. It's just sort of a way, I guess, that she and I, and many others see just kind of see the world, you know. It's that kind of outlook, and I feel that especially, you know, when you're living with or have lived with yourself or your loved ones, you know, with those kinds of things, mental illness, that darkness, just that darkness of the soul, that despair. I think that the people, you know, around, like surrounding that person who is suffering so much, I think a sense of humor, and it just develops kind of automatically and naturally and organically, just as a coping method, you know, and
Mm.
as a kind of counteract, you know, to that darkness. I know for my father, you know, with my father who suffered deeply from depression, actually bipolar disorder, he was diagnosed as with officially, and my sister too with depression. From day one, I think, you know, I felt that kind of I don't know. I guess I felt that sort of uh, demand or that obligation, I guess, in a sense, to, you know, to create lightness. Or I think I was always, you know, working hard at trying to make my father, for instance, and my sister happy, or, you know, to get a smile out of them or a reaction or something. And of course, when they weren't in the grip of their illness, they were, you know, happy people. I mean, it was, you know, obviously it's an up and down thing, but yeah, I feel like, yeah, that was kind of the role that I played in our family dynamic, you know.
Um, well, it works so well because it gives you kind of permission to see something and to see yourself in a way. I think that
Yeah.
it, the heaviness and the, you know, because right at some point things are just the way they are. Like if you're lying on the floor and nobody's coming, like you just have to lie on the floor until somebody comes. Like there's really nothing you can do about it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's great physical comedy, you know. No bones were broken.
Right, right, so you're right. You're not in pain, so it's a much more like relaxed thing. I mean, I have so many different notes of different ways to go. I mean, in to get a little more intense, I think in some way there's a huge part of this book that's about the silencing of women, and there are also, you know, references made to, you know, this community that Elvira's grown up in, and that, you know, she's left, which you've obviously written about in a lot of your other books.
Yeah.
But the big story that is told with the mother and about her trip on the film set and the experience she has there really has to do with kind of her being silenced and then looking for her voice and finding it eventually. But that's a big thing. Do you want to talk a little bit about writing that kind of story in this, which is a little bit different than how it's been written by you before?
Hmm. The story, particularly, you mean of the film?
Yeah, I was thinking when you, it seemed very parallel to me of, you know, like when you're on a film set, you're kind of sort of in another world. Like it's almost like a little community and you have this responsibility and these relationships and you have someone usually cooking for you, which I guess they did, and you're living somewhere else. And it's this very, like it seemed to me to be a little bit of a direct parallel, but maybe you weren't thinking about it that way.
Yeah, you mean like with my own experience in a movie?
Or well, I was actually thinking like no, with like the experience of Elvira, like leaving this community where like she
Oh,
also
got it.
kind of.
Yeah, 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 definitely. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, brain fog. Yeah.
So I
No,
watched
that
the
is
trailer of I watched the trailer of Silent Light this morning.
okay.
It's very hard to get.
Yeah, it's very, I think it is very hard to get. I mean, I don't know who distributes it, but yeah, I don't know exactly
Right.
where it's available, but I have a little DVD copy of it, you know, but nobody plays DVDs anymore. But yeah, no, that's true. That I hadn't even thought of that, and that makes a lot of sense. I mean, that is it, you know, like Elvira's community, the Mennonite community from where she's from and I'm from. Um, it is its own little world, and it's cut off intentionally from the rest of the world. I guess, you know, the motto of, you know, the Mennonite community that we're from, and all Mennonite communities, just is in the world but not of the world, you know. And I mean, my mother does compare it to a cult. That's going a little bit far, I think, but I mean, in many ways it's true. And you know, the rules and the expectations and that sort of culture of control, um shame. It is. so unlike, I mean, the film making a film, it is, you're right. I mean, it is, it's its own little world. The people, the cast and crew, that is your community for a period of time, and then you leave back into the real world. And yeah, there is definitely a parallel with that. And I think that the control too that people have on a film set, is the roles that they play, that is an interesting parallel. And I think a lot of people would say that living in a Mennonite community is very much like being in a movie,
And
because
then
it
the
is a kind
way,
of,
right, and then the way the character of the the mother is stuck in that film,
yeah,
and it was that, and so that like that big fight that so finally at one point when the grandmother tells,
yeah.
is it Swiv? How do you pronounce Swiv?
Swiv, yeah, yeah.
Of the story, um, it's like that, being kind of sort of a little bit deprived of food and being like
And fearful, quite fearful. I mean, being in, I mean, I don't think that my own mother, Elvira, would say that she was fearful in her community, but certainly, other people were. There was a lot to fear. And most of that was, if you were to step out of line, if you were to be excommunicated, if you were to be disciplined by the church, in any way, I mean, that was a big deal. And so, and the fearfulness instilled, just from a religious point of view, and this kind of, punishment, burning in hell forever, et cetera, and all of that crap. It plays on one's psyche, absolutely, and it can be terrifying. And I think that the fear that, the mother in the book experiences on the film set is maybe something that she's not even conscious of until much, 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 much later, in life.
um, but she gets over it and she fights. And this idea of this calling this book Fight Night, there's so many examples of women fighting. And I was thinking about like going through life and like how we fight and like what's easy for us and what we have to fight. And I think there's maybe more fighting sometimes than I want to admit.
I know what you mean. I think that's what I thought too. Before I wrote the book too, we had, earlier we were talking about sort of why was I motivated to write it. But I think that's true. Like I realized that too about my life, and I think the older I get, the more there is so much fighting involved. Fighting for our integrity, fighting for what we believe in, standing, and fighting for agency, fighting for respect, fighting for, our rights, like what is, I don't know. And then there's also the idea, and hopefully it's in the book, that idea of knowing when not to fight, like knowing what is a fight and what isn't a fight, and when do we walk away, like the Kenny Rogers. When do we run? It's so much, but it's true. Yeah, so much of life is about fighting, even if it's about consciously deciding not to fight.
Not to fight. Well, that we. So I think there was a line in Women Talking, and I might be getting it wrong, but that idea of when they talk about leaving being the way to preserve their faith, right? So even though you're leaving and it seems like you're doing something actively like bad, it's not because they were doing the thing to preserve. And there was something else in this also that made me think that way where you step back so the right thing can happen in the long run.
Yeah, yeah. And just biding one's time, sort of being able to kind of manage your energy. I mean, when there is so much fighting to be done in life, we have to
Just imagine,
know
like
to,
every time Swiv opens the door to that developer, it's
yeah.
like,
Yeah.
and even it's true. I think when a doorbell rings, maybe even for you the same way, like doorbells don't ring so much anymore. Like you kind of know who's coming, especially when the doorbell rings. And so every time for that doorbell to ring and for her to answer it with this kind of very hysterical,
Yeah, yeah. Or the cops. It's true, yeah, about the doorbell. Yeah, it's always kind of shocking, if we're like when it's out of the blue, if it's not
right.
somebody that we're expecting. And it's true, we don't, yeah, have a lot of, unexpected visitors, do we?
You have a quote that I don't remember what I Googled and I saw it come up and I couldn't figure out where it's from, so I don't know if it's really true. But is this true that you said there's no freer soul than me as a in the world as at age 9.
Yeah, I said that. I'm not sure if I wrote it in one of my books. I think it might have been in A Complicated Kindness, possibly, although I don't know.
Yeah, not
Yeah, there it
that.
is. Yeah, but I did say that, and I felt that, and it's a really, really, really strong, visceral kind of memory that I have of being 9 years old, like that age of being 9 years old, and just feeling like, you know, free. I was in charge of my life. I could do what I wanted. I could go where I wanted. Obviously, where I wanted to go and what I wanted to do was, within the realm of a 9-year-old. Yeah, exactly. So, I could freely roam around the town. I could, wear the clothes that I wanted to wear. I could eat what I wanted to eat. I could be friends with whom I wanted to be friends with. I still had to go to church. But ultimately, I just remember that feeling. I'll never forget. I remember what I was wearing. I was wearing, this simple cotton white t-shirt and a pair of fake jeans. We didn't have real jeans, and my mom had sewn some jeans out of like polyester made to look like denim, even with the outer stitching and stuff. I mean, so bad, right? But at the time, I just thought, wow, these are just killer, fantastic. And my North Star runners, I don't know why it was so vivid, but it was a beautiful feeling that I wish I could feel again.
Mm. Well, did you feel it while you were writing the character of Swiv, who is 9?
I think so. Although, I think definitely, I definitely, yeah, had that feeling. Although, Swiv too, like Swiv has those moments for sure, but Swiv also has a lot, on her mind. And I think, and a lot that she's worried about. But, there were moments for sure in the book where, yeah, I tried to kind of incorporate that feeling into Swiv, the same feeling that I had at age 9, just deep sense of, yeah, just enjoy, just the feeling of just so happy to be alive,
Mm.
that I understood the world and that the world was mine, that I belonged in it. And yeah, how often do we have feelings like that?
I mean, it's great. It's special. I mean, this little girl
Yeah.
is, I mean, things are asked of children in different ways in different cultures and societies. And so while, I mean, I think some of this is, satirical, I guess. She we've all seen like where I live down on the Lower East Side, and in New York City, there's a lot of like ultra orthodox people, and there are definitely like children who are young but who have a lot of responsibility that they seem to enjoy, at least from when you see it, or um, and I don't I think about how we work very hard sometimes to protect childhood, and I don't always wonder if that's how much responsibility can lead to kind of sort of growth. Obviously, too much responsibility, like escorting an elderly lady to California, probably too much. But,
Yeah, exactly.
um,
Yeah, I know. I mean, that's a good question, right? That's the question. I mean, as parents, as grandparents, I mean, how much do we, yeah, yeah, where's that line? A little bit of responsibility is obviously good. It makes you feel good when but too much can, yeah, we don't want to take the kids' childhood away. But yeah, I remember seeing when my father was in the ICU in Winnipeg, that he had a heart attack in his 50s actually, and he was on a respirator, and it was all very stressful and dire. And there was an old woman in the ICU with him, a patient, and her granddaughter from Russia had come to be with her. And her granddaughter was older than Swiv is in the book. I think her granddaughter was, maybe 15 or 14 or 15 or 16. But she had come on her own to be with her grandmother and to sort of navigate all the hospital stuff, and to take care of her grandmother when her grandmother was discharged from the hospital. And yeah, and I remember being so intrigued with her and this and this relationship, and it was this kind of amazing thing to me.
I mean, if this is the book you're writing in a sense for your grandchildren, you've covered a lot of really beautiful things, also about birth and death, right? And things that sometimes are hidden from children that you know, I mean, for in our house, like there was not much hiding, and we've had if people have been in the hospital, as long as they've been comfortable, like I've always tried to bring and tried to see all these different sides. But
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting too in Mennonite culture. I mean, death, um, is not something that is kept away from children. So much, it's such a rural, traditionally, agriculture and farming and animals and birth and death and, and all of this stuff going on that kids are exposed to. But also with people dying. And we have open casket funerals, and there's a real onus on the family to go and to say goodbye and to look at the person, the dead person in the coffin, and and to say a little prayer, etc. And it's very, and all the kids go to the funerals. It's just not, and to the graveside to bury. It's just a part of our culture that we're exposed to from day one. And there's been a lot of death in my mother's family, and mine. And I think it's something that I remember. I remember when my son, when my father died and he committed suicide, and it was the first suicide in our family, the first of several, and we were all in such shock. We had not expected that, and my kids were at home with me and my partner at the time. And then my mom was at our place too, and my sister. So we were all at our place, and we were all just sort of together, just kind of in shock, trying to understand. And my partner decided to bring the kids to his mother's place. They were, my kids were at that time, they were 11 and 8. And he said, you know what, I just think it would be best. This is just too bizarre and horrifying. And this concept, how are we going to explain what happened to their grandpa, who was, of, in their lives. I mean, he was fine one day and not fine, but, and so he took them there, and my son and then so they spent the night there with their other grandma, and then they came back the next day. They came home the next day. But my son, who was 11, he has really never, I mean, he understands now. He's in his 30s. He's a parent himself. But he was so angry about that. He felt that he knew that something was going on, something terrible had happened, obviously. And for him to have then been carted off away from, the discussion, and just away from all of us, yeah, he was not happy about that. It was the wrong decision.
I mean, I hear that. It's and that's those are interesting things. Then to the next time do what I actually feel the same way about weddings. Like my mom, when we were planning my wedding, like she was like not a big fan of like kids at weddings. And then my husband's family, there were like a lot of young cousins, so we had a lot of these young cousins, but we didn't have that. There weren't that many kids on our side really at that point that we were not having. They were kind of peripheral, let's say.
Right.
But I was thinking, you want to, accept the fact that you're paying for it and it's New York City and all those things, like you to go to a wedding many times as a child, as a young adult, as it that then paves the way for you, I think, to understand. I mean, the same way with funerals, the same way, right? I know so many people who don't bring their children to the funeral, or they go to the funeral but not to the grave site, or things. And I mean, it's macabre, but at the same time, I think it's part of.
Yeah.
And nobody shies away from what I mean. Just that, like using like the word like BM for bowel movement, like I mean, it reminds me of like ways I heard people talk in my family long time
Yeah.
ago.
Yeah, about the body, and that is something, the body and the body, the functions of the body, and sex and death and birth, and everything that the body experiences. And not everybody experiences sex or birth, I suppose, but and it's yeah, and that is something too about my mother, the inspiration. She's very, very, very comfortable with her body, and talking about all of that stuff. And so it's my own kids are more squeamish about that, that kind of stuff than she is, that's for sure.
There's a line here where the mother starts to breastfeed at the end, and and Swiv says something like, you know, or it's at some point with the birth thing at the end, she has this experience. And the other day I said something to my daughter, and I could, you could see behind her eyes, like, and she was like, "Mom, just stop."
Yeah, stop,
Like,
stop.
right, and she couldn't quite get it out. You could see it, like, almost like flickering. Um,
Yeah.
but that, you need those people around to say those things out loud,
Yeah.
um, to hopefully make it so people aren't afraid to talk about the things that are important, that then lead sometimes to these, like, when someone is questioning things and then doesn't know who to talk to,
Yeah.
then that gets closed off, and then
Yeah. Exactly.
so the intergenerational part of it. I mean, the fact that you guys all live together also, and you have that is also something that, again, like, doesn't happen as much now,
Yeah.
but I think is so beautifully rich. Um,
We're going to have 4 generations living here soon, actually. So Eric and I are building a little laneway house in the backyard kind of thing. So Eric and I are going to move in there. And then my daughter and her husband and 2 kids are going to move here to the second floor where we're living. And my mother is going to stay where she is. So we'll have, yeah, 4 generations here in this, on this property.
I mean, that's right, but for all the, it's much, I'm sure the amazing part is going to outweigh the rest of it.
Yeah,
Um,
let's hope.
we'll check back in with you in November.
Yeah,
Um,
if I'm still around.
so I'm not sure I have like another question. Like, I don't want to just talk for talking's sake. I'm so excited to share this book with our community and the world, and all the other things that, kind of, you're going to bring forth, and whatever the
Thank you.
next thing is going to be.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing it with everybody. Thank you for everything that you're doing, as a bookseller. I know that's not an easy gig, and I appreciate it. We all appreciate it, we writers.
it's a it's a really, it also feels like a really lucky thing to be able to do.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of my dream job too. I would love to. Yeah. I know so much. I mean, there's so much, it's not like you're sitting around reading new books and there's so much work and administrative and business and all of that and, to do. But it does seem like a kind of dreamy,
I
dreamy
mean, you
job.
could find someone to do that part of it, and you could do the other part with them.
Right. Yeah.
I'm still doing it all, but I'm gonna eventually there'll be some delegation at some point.
I hope so.
Um,
Yeah, that would be good.
well, I mean, I could go on, but I just feel like I want to honor your time, and
Oh, that's fine. I'm sorry if I've rambled on about
no,
I
no,
don't know.
it makes it all the richer. I mean, so what I'm excited about, so to air this after the book comes out, and to, just let people know that we've talked, like, even though no one's really given anything away. Um,
Yeah.
I think everything you said was really fascinating. So
Well, I really doubt that. I'm sure everything I said wasn't really fascinating, but
in the way, like,
it'll be
the
fun.
small things, like, these small things add up, I think, so much. And
Yeah.
those little moments, and being able just to sit here, like, in Connecticut and
Yeah.
Toronto, and talk about something that's going to come out, and talk, and I don't know. I think
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's great and it's fun. And and again, like I said in my email, this is the first time that I've spoken really about Fight Night. So I feel as though I'm really not articulating myself very well. And I think with every writer, other writers will tell you this. It's really only after we've written the book, after we've had some reaction to the book, after readers have talked to us about their feelings about having read the book, that we actually even begin to understand what it is that we've done, like the psychology and the motivation and the need and the reasons for writing books, I think, are sometimes as mysterious to the writer as to
Hmm.
the reader.
Well, I'll say, when they go to California, and all the cousins talk about the mom, and they call her brave. And then when Swift comes back and she says, like, they all said you were brave, like, how powerful that felt for her, was because she's the one we see, in a sense, we see the least of her. And then we hear her story through someone else's, kind of, sort of description of it. And so but that idea of bravery and women being brave and women kind of modeling for each other in what we do. I mean, I know your mom did that for you, obviously. I think that's what we can do, right? Even when I took this job as a bookseller, like I hadn't been working and my children were not that interested in me being, not available 100% of the time, even to this day. Like they still, I think, would like me to be available to them all the time. And I wasn't ready to do that anymore, but I hope they will look back at this and see, oh, like that was
That was amazing. What
for
you
a
did was
reason.
amazing. Well, that's exactly, and I think our kids do, they get that, it might take a while, but when they grow up and they realize, and maybe, maybe it takes having kids of their own or not. I mean, but I think they sort of realize, oh, yeah. Um, because I think often, and mothers especially, in history, in literature, in society today, I mean, often there's a kind of, the sort of crazy, harried mother trying to do everything, sort of, kind of emotionally, whatever it is. And I think too that the mother in Fight Night, there's a little bit of that. And of course, from Swiv's point of view, oh, she's so crazy, this and this and this and this and this, right? And again, that's a typical 9-year-old's perspective. But I think for me, it was just really necessary, yeah, to I guess have Swiv, go come to that understanding that, oh, my mom, she's okay. I'm afraid that she's cracking up and that she's going to kill herself and that she's on the verge of a nervous breakdown and that she's not going to be able to take care of me and that she's nuts. But in fact, she's amazing. She's living life. Yeah, she's reacting to stuff and she's kind of, she has outbursts and freakouts and, all of that stuff. But, she's a human being and yeah, she's strong.
Yeah. I mean, I've done a lot of the things the
Yeah.
mothers have done. I hope that wasn't like the super crazy made up part because um, there are times where it's like, oh my God, just
Yeah.
so.
Yeah. We take on a lot. Yeah.
Right. There you go.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate this. Thank you.
Um, and I hope we get to talk at some other point about something else fun. So,
I hope so too. And if I'm ever passing through, I will pop into the bookstore. Maybe you'll be there, maybe you won't, but it'd be
well,
nice
if
to
we're
check it
passing
out.
through, I'll make sure to be there.
I'll let you know if I'm going to be passing through.
All right. Thank you so much, Miriam.
Thanks again,
All
Kira.
right. Take
Okay.
care.
Bye. You too. Bye bye.